I will remember you. Will you remember me? Greetings and salutations. It is I, Mr. Nothing, the museum curator of the weird and the strange, and the host who might be an Ent. Tree thing. Welcome back to Around the Weird, a booktube channel where I talk about all the strange and unusual literature that I have found while in battle at Helm's Deep. Again, it's an exciting time because I am talking about the Lord of the Rings series on this little mini-series I'm doing about all of the books, going through it the first time because I never read it. Meant to in high school but didn't, and I'm clearly seeing, at this point, seeing that I was wrong not to read it because I missed so much. And yeah, it's definitely worth giving a read. So I might, and also I got this from the library, and I might just end up buying it. Like, it's worth it. Like, I checked this out from the library. I'll probably end up buying the 3 books, and then later on down the road also The Hobbit, because Tolkien is worth it in my opinion. So when we last met Frodo and his Fellowship of the Ring, they were out at Amon Hen, a mountain, and Frodo, fearful because Boromir had tried to claim the ring, and also because he saw the devastation that Sauron was planning to bring forth on Middle-earth, Frodo decided to go about taking the ring to Mount Doom alone. But Sam managed to catch up with him, so Sam is also going on this trip. So where does that leave Frodo? Well, in Book 3, which is the first half of The Two Towers, we actually don't get to see where Frodo is. Interestingly, this book follows Aragorn, Legolas, Gimli, and a surprise, Gandalf. You remember in the second video, we thought he had died because the Balrog he had fallen into a deep chasm with the Balrog, although we never saw him die. So it was foolish of us to think that a wizard could be done in so easily. Where are we at the start of this story? So the story starts immediately following Fellowship, which I think, because Tolkien wrote these stories back to back to back, it's really easy to do that. The story starts with Aragorn searching for Frodo, and he hears a calamity, and comes upon Boromir. Boromir, who has a bunch of arrows in him and a whole bunch of orcs strewn around him, which is pretty badass in my opinion. But it appears that Boromir is dying and that the orcs carried off Merry and Pippin. Very unfortunate for them. And Boromir, he has his regrets about clamoring for the ring, because it scared off Frodo, and it probably wasn't worth it in the end. In his last words, he says, remember the son of Denethor, or something like that. And I think that's the first time where it's revealed that Boromir is royalty as well, for the kingdom of Minas Tirith. I don't think it's mentioned even at the Council of Elrond where he first appears. I might have to go back and check that out, but it just shows up out of nowhere. And what do you do with that information? Because it doesn't really pop up in the first half of Two Towers. So what does Tolkien want me to do with that information? I still argue, like I said in my second video, that Boromir is kind of a useless character. But anyways, yeah. Aragorn promises that his death will not be in vain, which is yet another death that weighs on Aragorn, because once Gandalf died, he took control of the group, and now Boromir has died, and so he has to shoulder that as well and pick up the extra slack, which, although Aragorn is capable of handling it, you don't want to handle that on your own. Thankfully, he has Legolas and Gimli to travel along with, and so a large part of the first section of this book is devoted to Aragorn, Gimli, and Legolas running after Merry and Pippin. They think about going after Frodo and Sam, but they decide that like leaving Merry and Pippin will ultimately lead to their death, so they decide to chase after them. Eventually, they come upon the riders of Rohan, and they're kind of neutral, and they don't really seek war with Sauron at this point. They're more at war with Saruman, who's been sending orcs out left and right, or Uruk-hai, which are this new breed of orc who are more powerful. So they're currently fighting that, and I think one of the characters even says like they wish that they could just move out of the way so that Saruman, who is clearly at this point betraying Sauron and seeking to take the ring for himself and maybe like enslave Sauron in some way. So like they're gonna fight, and like the Rohan people just want to move out of the way so that can happen. But they also note that doing so, like whoever wins that fight is going to be more powerful for it. So like whoever wins, like it's bad for the Rohanians. And eventually Aragorn makes it to the forest, the Fanghorn forest, where they encounter some traces of Merry and Pippin, but not enough. Not enough to figure out where they've gone. So meanwhile, I might say that word a lot, meanwhile. So meanwhile, while all this is going on, Merry and Pippin, like the night before, they were kidnapped by the orcs or the Uruk-hai, who were like they wanted to take them to Isengard so Saruman could like bend them to his will, and like the orcs get into a fight with the riders of Rohan, who like slaughter a lot of them, and Merry and Pippin manage to sneak off into the Fanghorn forest, where they encounter an Ent, Treebeard, who is a wonderful character and just a joy to be around. Treebeard has actually never heard of hobbits before, so he's initially suspicious of the hobbits, but they manage to convince him that they're actually a real type of race on Middle Earth, and Treebeard is at a point where like he's very upset about what Saruman and Sauron are doing, because they're taking trees out of the forest and burning them. And so Merry and Pippin try to convince him to join the war, and he's like, "Okay, well, we got to talk to the Ents for that. We got to have an Ent moot." So they Treebeard goes to the meeting of the Ents, which lasts for several hours, and many of the Ents want to be neutral, but they ultimately decide, because the war is coming to them whether they wanted to or not. They have to go and take on Saruman, and so they're heading to Isengard, and that's pretty much happening while Aragorn and company do their thing. And so while Aragorn are in Fanghorn Forest, Aragorn and Legolas and Gimli, they encounter this is after Merry and Pippin have left, and so they encounter a man clad in white who kind of looks like Saruman, because Saruman is Saruman the White, or Saruman of all colors, of many colors. It differs depending on like how you read it, but they're initially worried, but the man reveals himself to be Gandalf, who is still alive. Gandalf ends up telling them about his fight with the Balrog, how they fell into a deep chasm within the earth, possibly Tolkien highlighting Hollow Earth theory, but I can't say for sure there. And so the fight with the Balrog lasted about a week, which is a pretty epic fight, and it ended with Gandalf slaying the Balrog and collapsing dead, and he felt his spirit like go into the ether, which I think is heaven, but for some reason he was placed back on Earth, given a second chance, and I was very confused by this, and I actually had to look up the backstory around that, and it turns out that might actually be Eru, the god of everything, giving Gandalf a second chance, righting the wrongs that exist, so to speak, but you know that's reading way into it and not just taking it as it is on the surface. So at this point, Gandalf and company decide to go to Edoras, which is a kingdom in Rohan. They go visit King Theoden, if I'm pronouncing that right, who at this point is made to be neutral in the war. He's being influenced by his counselor advisor, Grima Wormtongue, which is a very evil name, and it seems like he's called that because of the way he looks, but if you're called Grima Wormtongue, you are 100% going to be turned evil at some point, whether through coercion by an outside force or just simply because people are calling you Wormtongue all the time, you're gonna turn evil. Anyways, he's influencing Theoden, who is kind of old and disheveled at this point, but once Gandalf shows up, it revitalizes him. He's ready to join the war against Saruman, because that is the immediate threat at this point. They end up going to a little keep called Helm's Deep, which is where Saruman plans to attack with his Uruk-hai and his hillsmen. There's a very epic battle, a wonderfully written chapter, much like the Bridge of Khazad Dûm. There's so many orcs, and there's a risk of being overwhelmed by everything. In a hilarious moment, something that I thought was just limited to the movies, Legolas and Gimli end up counting their kills and trying to one up each other over the course of this book, and maybe even the next book. I'm not sure about that, Legolas laughs several times. It's just I can't believe how he can wield that axe. It's so bizarre. But as dawn arises, there's still that risk of overwhelming, and the Uruk-hai are about to be inside the keep. But luckily, Gandalf arrives with some reinforcements. He comes to us now at the turn of the tide, I believe is the popular saying in the movies, at least. Gandalf shows up and saves the day, and the orcs flee or die, and the hillsmen surrender and are made to repair the keep. So things look pretty good as they destroyed a lot of Saruman's forces at Helm's Deep. They then decide to march to Isengard to confront Saruman, and that's where Gandalf encounters Ents, along with Aragorn and Legolas and company. And they had previously not really known about the Ents, but the Ents are on their way to Isengard too. But when they get to Isengard, they discover that a lot of it is underwater because the Ents flooded. They used the Isen River to flood Isengard, and so Saruman has retreated with Grima Wormtongue to the big tower, one of the two towers in this book, which is Orthanc, I believe it's pronounced. They also encounter Pippin and Merry at the front gates, who have been told by Treebeard to stand guard there. And they end up joining Gandalf as they're at the base of Orthanc, and they talk to Saruman, basically trying to get him to surrender. But Saruman tells them, Gandalf, why don't you join me up here? I gave you that proposition earlier that we could take over all of Middle Earth, that this could be ours to rule. Why didn't you do it? You jerk. And Gandalf's like, haha, I told you no the first time, and I can't believe you've fallen this far, you terrible person. And Saruman just gets really angry, and he refuses to surrender, and he's just going to stay in his tower. Grima Wormtongue ends up throwing his palantir at Saruman in an effort to either kill him or hurt the company, their fellowship. Pippin ends up collecting the palantir, and Gandalf just remarks how he's pretty sad how Saruman has fallen, and in his bid to rise to power, he's only drawn Sauron's ire. So if the men of Middle Earth aren't able to stop Sauron, he's just going to march to Orthanc and kill Saruman when he gets a chance. So bad times are to be had by him for trying to usurp the man who was trying to use his wizardry for various things. Pippin ends up messing with the Palantir, Saruman's Palantir, and he encounters the Eye of Sauron, and he sees all the terrible things that are happening, and it fills him with dread, and Gandalf sees it, and tells him, knock it off, don't do that again. But it's clear that Sauron's still a threat, and in case you forgot it over the course of this book, because the main threat was Saruman, he's still there. And so book 3 ends with Gandalf and Pippin going to Minas Tirith. They're going to prepare for Sauron's arrival as the war is heating up, at least the Sauron's war. So that's the end of that book there. Overall, I would say I thoroughly enjoyed the first half of Two Towers. I thought it was interesting how, and this is one of my critiques too, I thought it was interesting how after the Fellowship broke up, the first thing that Tolkien did was that he didn't focus on Frodo. He focused instead on Aragorn and his sort of quest to restore Gondor and make sure that evil was removed from Middle-earth, in this story at least through Saruman, in the next story probably through Sauron. So I thought it was interesting, but I still have a lot of questions, like where is Frodo? I understand why this was done, because there's two stories at play here. There's Aragorn's story and the rise of Gondor, and there's Frodo's story, which is eliminating the ring. And so you can't possibly intermingle those without muddling the story. I get why it's done, but I still at the time, what if you had read Fellowship first, and then you're like, I can't wait for the sequel, and then you read the sequel, and it's you don't see anything about Frodo for the first 200 or so pages. It would be pretty disorienting, I think, at least. Another thing I liked was how Saruman is a tragic villain. He turned his back on other wizards like Gandalf in order to gain dominion over the men of Middle-earth and the elves and the dwarves. He craved power, and that came back to bite him on the rear end. The way that he saw that he could get power was obeying Sauron to a point. I'll help you get back the ring, but then he doesn't give the ring to Sauron, and he instead goes to war and possibly defeats Sauron. Saruman was already evil, so I wonder if the ring would have had the same effect on him as it does with Boromir or possibly Gandalf or Frodo. Maybe it would have just made him more evil and more destructive. I don't know for sure, but it is an interesting thing to think about there. And despite all these risks that he took and this challenge that he posed towards Saruman has nothing to show for it. And that's really sad. At the very end, he's locked away in his tower, unwilling to receive any help or apologize to Gandalf, unwilling to leave it, because what if Sauron shows up and kills him? That's the life that he leads. And I'm interested in seeing where it goes from here in the third book, if Saruman even shows up at that point. It'd be interesting to know what his future is, because it doesn't look like a very happy one. I'll also say that the Helm's Deep chapter is pretty rad. Just an amazing chapter about a battle that takes place between Saruman's forces and the Rohan and the Fellowship gang. And it's cool how Gandalf shows up in the morning and is ready to provide reinforcements because things are looking pretty grim at that point. It had the same vibe as the Bridge of Khazad Dûm, as I noted earlier. How it was a thrilling chapter that kept you on the edge of your seat and wanting more as you read along. Wonderful writing on Tolkien's part again. I really think Tolkien ended the first half of the story in a wonderful way. because what he did was he had Pippin look into the Palantir and he saw Sauron, and like the threat of Sauron came rushing back after you spent the entire book focusing on the Uruk-hai and Saruman and all of the danger he posed. Here comes Tolkien to say, nah, son, that's the dude you gotta worry about. Yeah, it's just like, don't forget about this dude that exists. And I think it's a wonderful way to lead into what I think is going to be Frodo's story in the second part, because you dealt with one evil, and now you got to go to the bigger bad and focus on the thing that Frodo's trying to destroy in the second half. Like, you're focusing on what they fought for in the first half, because Saruman wants that ring and Frodo has it. So I think that's well structured on Tolkien's part, and I guess like that answers the previous problem I had with Where's Frodo. Like I understand. I guess I understand why it was done now. Talking myself through it, I guess it makes more sense. Gandalf's death and return is a bit confusing. That's one of the biggest problems I had with this specific book. Gandalf dies, which feels like it has a lot of emotional weight, but then he just shows up again pretty quickly, like in the Two Towers. And the explanation that he gives is not very clear at all as to why he's still alive. As I mentioned earlier, like, the lore around it is that Eru, the god of Middle-earth, the powers that be brought him back. And, like, it's just like, oh, he's got to come back, I guess. And it reminds me a lot of Buffy the Vampire Season 3, where at the end of Season 2, Buffy has to kill her boyfriend, Angel, because he's an evil vampire who's bringing about the end of the world. And, like, it's a very powerful moment. But then he just comes back in Season 3. And the explanation that they give is that the powers that be, an actual group that exists, the powers that be, want him to come back. And it's not a very good answer, and it's why I hate Season 3 of Buffy so much. And just relating it back to here, like, it really weakens the story by giving us the powers that be wanted Gandalf back. And I feel like Tolkien wanted to write Gandalf into the story again, but he didn't have a good enough answer for how that happened. And so, like, that's always going to be a tiny flaw that exists in the Lord of the Rings series. Those are my thoughts on the Lord of the Rings, to the Two Towers, book 3, sorry. It's a wonderful book. I can't wait to see what happens in book 4, which I should have lined up for, for Friday or Saturday. So make sure you read the fourth book, Two Towers Part 2, by Friday if you are reading along with me. If you have something to say about what I just said or what happened in the story, or you just want to tell me that I'm wrong about the Lord of the Rings, feel free to comment below. I would love to hear from you. In the meantime, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so that other people may hear about this delicious story written by a quality author who I'm growing to appreciate more and more. Until then, I wish you the best of luck in your weird and inty travels. Farewell.